Today we're fortunate enough to have David Ferry read for us. David Ferry is the author of No Country I Know, New and Selected Poems and Translations, which was winner of the 2000 Rebecca Johnson Bobbitt National Prize for Poetry and the Academy of American Poets Lenore Marshall Poetry Prize. He is the translator of Gilgamesh, the Odes of Horace, the Epistles of Horace, and if this list seems impressive, it really is, and the Georgics of Virgil, all published by Farrar Straus. Ferry's numerous other awards include the 60th Fellowship of the Academy of American Poets, the Teasdale Prize for Poetry, the John Simon Guggenheim Foundation Fellowship, the Ingram Merrill Award, and the William Arrowsmith Translation Prize from Agni Magazine. In 1998, he was elected a Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. He is the Sophie Chantal Hart Professor Emeritus of English at Wellesley College and a visiting lecturer in creative writing at Boston University. If you don't mind, I would just like to read a sonnet of David's, which is a particular favorite of mine that I return to again and again. It's called Kythera. It's a 1980 sonnet. And it depicts a scene of epic departure. A group of warriors are about to set sail, and yet it's written in such beautiful and spare language. There they go, down to the fatal ship. They know how beautiful they are. The ship will sail very soon. The sea will cover them over very soon unknowingly. Wave goodbye from the shore, children. I can see how your faces change in the sight of their going away. Wave to them. Their sails are of silk. They're very pretty. The sunset is all smiles, radiance, the hues of a first or last innocence. You look hungry, children, tired, angry. Very beautiful is the manner of their going. Music is playing about the mast. Their lovely faces look lovelier still compared to the angry children. I welcome David Ferry. Thank you.
Thanks.
Please silence yourself for me. Thank
you. I want to read a variety of things, so there'll be a lot of this going back and forth. I'd like to start, because there's just time to do it, with a poem called October. It's 4 3-line stanzas. The day was hot and entirely breathless, so the remarkably quiet, remarkably steady leaf fall seemed as if it had no cause at all. The ticking sound of falling leaves was like the ticking sound of gentle rainfall as they gently fell on leaves already fallen, or as they passed them in their falling, now and again it happened that one of them touched one or another leaf as yet not falling, still clinging to the idea of being summer, as if the leaves that were falling, but not the day, had read and understood the calendar. And then this is, I want to read a couple of 2 or 3 odes of Horace that I like a lot. I like all the odes of Horace a lot. This one is called Two Lovers Talking. It's the 9th ode of the 3rd book of odes. He says, "When you loved me the best, and I thought there was nobody else, before you preferred to mine Callias's arms around your beautiful shoulders, then I was as happy as can be, happier than the king of Persia was. She says, when you loved me the best, and I thought there was nobody else, and Chloe wasn't first on the list in your heart, I was. Why, then I thought I was the toast of everyone. I was happier than Mars' beloved Ilia was." He says, Now I love Chloe best, Chloe, whose singing and her playing on the lyre charms everyone who hears her. Chloe is the one I'd die for if I had to, if the fates would only spare her to live happily ever after. She says, I love Callias best, who is Ornita's son. Callias loves me too. It's entirely mutual. Callias is the one I would die for if I had to, if the fates would only allow him to live happily ever after. He says, what if Venus took it into her head to join together once again those whom she had parted? How would it be if lovely Chloe were shown the door, and the door were left wide open for Lydia to come back in? She says, Callias is fairer than any star in the sky, and you are lighter than a cork bobbing upon the waters of the stormy Adriatic Sea. But if you say you love me, I'll love you truly forever. And this is the 30th ode of the first book. To Venus. Venus, queen of Cnidos and of Paphos, leave your island, Cyprus, which you love, and come to Glycera's house, which she has made with incense and with prayer, a shrine to Venus. And bring your child, the amorous boy, and bring the half-clad Graces too, and bring the nymphs and Mercury, and with them lovely youth, whose loveliness without you is as nothing. And then I'd like to read Ode 128, 28th ode of the first book, which is very different in tone. It's in two parts. The first is addressed as to a traveler ashore on a beach near Tarentum, happens upon the grave of the Pythagorean philosopher Archytas. What good does it do you, Archytas, confined as you are to this little heap of earth on this lonely strand beside the sea? Archytas, you measured the earth and counted all the uncountable grains of sand there are on the beach. What good does it do you now? What good does it do that once upon a time you went out exploring the houses of gods in the sky, adventuring in your mind round heaven's rotunda? What good does it do now death has taken your measure? The father of Pelops fell, though he was once convivial at the banquet of the gods, and Tithonus fell, whom heaven had taken up. Minos, too, whom Jupiter had conferred with, and Pythagoras, having chosen the very shield that belonged to Euphorbus, the long-dead Trojan hero, from 100 other shields of long-dead heroes, thought he, Pythagoras, must have been he, Euphorbus, back in a former life, and so he died a second time, and therefore he was sent a second time to Orcus down below, this time for good. Pythagoreans who think Pythagoras by far the best witness there ever was to truth and nature, he must have defeated death at least that once. But no, be sure of this. The dark is final, once and for all, body and soul for all, and all must go there by the path of death. Some are presented by the Furies as a spectacle for the pleasure of savage Mars. The hungry sea devours the drowning sailor. Old and young jostle together on their way down. No one is spared by cruel Proserpina. The voice of the unburied corpse of a sailor nearby on the beach speaks to the traveler. I too have perished. I too was one who drowned. Notice, bad wind, confederate of Orion, brought on the storm that overwhelmed my boat. And so it was. I died. O traveler, O passerby, do not refuse a few handfuls of sand to cover up my corpse, exposed, unburied here on the lonely beach. 3 handfuls given, then no matter how the surface raised up by the great storm wind, may you be safe, and may the harmless storm exhaust its rage upon the Venusian woods far inland. May good fortune come to you from Jupiter and from Neptune, god of Tarentum. If you refuse, have you thought about the curse? It may be you who needs these rites someday, and they may be disdained. O passerby, I will not unavenged, unburied be. No penitential offering later on will help you then. Therefore, pause but a moment to give 3 handfuls of sand and go on your way. And this is a poem called At the Street Corner. If I can find it, wait a minute. Sorry, I don't seem to have brought it. This is a poem. My wife and I, for years, have worked at a supper for street people at a church in Boston, and a number of poems of mine have come from that experience. This is one called Coffee Lips. The guest who came into the street people's suppers last night, an elderly man with a lost, smart little boy's face, and a look as if he might turn against you any time soon, as if he'd just come into the world and he was extremely wary about what the world was going to be. And he said, "If I ask you a question, will you give me a truthful answer?" And I said, "That depends on what the question is," thinking the little elderly boy looked sophisticated and as if he'd in fact been a long time in the world and would get the tone right. And maybe he did, or maybe he didn't. At any rate, he went on to ask the question, when I come into places like this, and there are people holding coffee cups to their lips, and they look at me, are they about to drink the coffee or not to drink the coffee? He was balancing the world on the tip of his witty, unknowing nose. I felt like I was falling down someplace else than anywhere there. And this is a poem called Movie Star Peter. Movie star Peter at the supper for street people. The style of form of concealment, the way style is, his manners seem to parody almost of manners. A movie star of bygone days, strangely elaborate, highly stylized manners, complicit with his fame and with your praise, looking toward you and then away from you, star-like, movie star-like, a dance routine, the walk almost a glide or elegant shuffle, always on the verge of veering away, circling away and over to the other side of the frozen skating arena that he was on. A dancer's courtesy. The courtesy, I mean, of the dancer to the audience, flirtatious and familiar, only for you, and entirely impersonal and withheld. All of the above, though, maybe misses the point, because it seemed to say he knew about what he was doing or what the style was for, and nothing let one be sure that this was so. A look on his face of amusement, as if he knew a secret that he shared with you and yet kept to himself, as if it only showed the cryptogram but wouldn't provide the key to read it with. But could he read the code? One night, late at night, as we were driving home from having had dinner out in Boston, we saw him figure skating through Charles Street Circle, right through and among the circling lights of cars, as if with champion skill on thin ice whirling, oblivious to the astonished blaring horns, as a dancer or skater seems, while dancing to the music that we hear, oblivious to the music that we hear, and listening to some other music heard from somewhere else. So Peter moved like a dancer or skater through and among the dangerous, outraged cars, as if untouchable and untouched, and moving to the sounds of something else from somewhere else. The music, maybe, of his madness, was it? It was as if he skated in solitude and glided whirling on a lonely tarn far out away from everything there is. In a poem that's actually a translation of a poem by Rilke called Song of the Drunkard. I don't know what it was I wanted to hold on to. I kept losing it. And I didn't know what it was, except I wanted to hold on to it. The drink kept it in. So at least for a while, it felt as if I had it, whatever it was. But it was the drink that had it, and held it, and had a hold of me too, asshole. Now I'm a card in the drink's hand, while he keeps smiling like he doesn't give a shit in a game that's going badly. And when death wins, he'll scratch his scabby neck with the greasy card and throw me down on the table. And then I'll just be another one of the cards in the pile on the fucking table. So what the fuck? And this is a poem about the great painter Watteau. The poem is called Civilization and Its Discontents. The poem is about actually an engraving of that painting that we happen to have in our house. Under the Burin's meditative gaze, caught in the cross-hatching and close working of the great engraving, of the great painting Fête Vénitienne, entangled in the entrapment of the scription, as if in vines entangled, or the entanglement of the veins. It is Watteau himself, a naked soul, suffering the humiliation and pain of the company of fellow human beings, dressed up as a country shepherd, pretending to play the bagpipe or musette for them to dance to, looking over at, what's-his-name, at Flugel's monstrously civilized great turkey cock, here shown displaying all his gorgeous plumage in grandiose dance, while all about in studied mutual disposition others were, and Venus was presiding over the scene, and over all this the great embroidered trees. And a poem called Committee. Coldly the sun shone down on the moonlit scene. Our committee stirred uneasily in its sleep. Better not know too much too soon all about it. The knees of grammar and syntax touched each other, furtive in pleasure, under the oaken table. The river lay, not moving, under the light of the shadowy, earthly, winter lunar scene. The ends of justice are determined in the conditions of our sleep. The spellbound scene arranged itself in a traditional way, transfixed and perfectly still. Unspoken agreements spoke volumes on the bookshelves of the room. Anybody who's ever been on a committee will know what I mean, I think. The next is a translation or a rendering from Babylonian, not from the Gilgamesh, but from an amazing poem that's known to the scholars as the Babylonian Jove. I'm just going to read part of it, the narrative part. It was apparently, it dates from, I don't know, the second millennium BCE, and the guy was apparently some sort of court functionary or bureaucrat. At least it reads like that to me. The voice is astonishingly. I don't know whether I got it, but I think the voice in it is astonishingly alive and present and paranoid. Narrative. Everywhere around me, there is confusion. Enlil and the other gods have given me up. The personal God has gone away from my house. The Lady Fortune has gone to someplace else, somebody else. I see the omens everywhere I look. The king, the sun that shines on his happy people, the king is angry and he will not hear me. When I go to the palace now, they look at me. One person blinks and another looks away. What are these omens? How is it I should read them? When I lie down to dream, I have nightmares. In the street, I see the others looking at me. I see how people point their fingers at me. I hear them talking about me in the street. One says, I made him want to end his life. One says, I will take over his position. I'll be the one who goes and lives in his house. 6 or 7 talking in the street. 6 or 7 gathered in the street. Storm demons raging against me in the street. The year has turned, and everywhere I look, wherever I look, the signs of my bad luck. I cannot find out anywhere what is right. I pray to my personal God, and he doesn't answer. I pray to the Lady Fortune, she will not listen. I went to the dream interpreter, he poured libations to the gods, but they said nothing. The Zakik spirit said nothing. Nothing was what could be done by the one whose charms can charm away the evil spirits. Everywhere around me there is confusion. Everything is strange. It is as if I did not pray to the gods. It is as if I did not properly say the name of the goddess before I eat my meal. It is as if I did not teach my household how to honor the gods. It is as if I taught my household people how to neglect the holy days and festivals of the year. I kept the rules. To worship was my joy. The music of the procession delighted me. Before I ate, I spoke the name of the god. I taught my people how to honor the gods and to honor the king as if he were a god. I taught my people how to respect the palace. I wish I knew these things would please the gods. I wish I knew the meaning of these things. Who knows the will of the gods in heaven? Who knows? Maybe the gods despise what men think right. Maybe what men think wrong delights the gods. Who knows the ways of the gods of the underworld? What man has ever learned the ways of the gods? Today he is dead who was living yesterday. From gladness to sorrow is but the blink of an eye. He sings in joy this moment, who wails the next. Around me everywhere there is confusion. Everything is strange. A storm wind drives me along. Sickness has come upon me. An evil wind has blown in from the horizon. As new little plants come up through the ground in spring, when their time has come, the weakness comes up through the ground. The coughing comes up. It comes up horribly laughing out of the abyss. The headache comes up out of the underworld. The bone ache comes from the surface of the waters. The Lamashu demon comes down from the mountain. All of the demons gather themselves upon me. The phlegm fills up my throat, and my throat chokes. Whatever I eat is vile. Beer, solace of men, is vile in my mouth. Grain is vile in my mouth. All night the demons torment me. What are they saying? I cannot hear what it is that they are saying. Where has my dignity gone and my good looks? The exorcist has nothing to say. The diviner has nothing to say. My personal God has not come to my rescue. The Lady Fortune has not. My chest was broad, my arms were strong, and now a boy could easily wrestle me to the ground. My looks are strange. The flesh is loose on my bones. I try to walk. My feet have forgotten how. My knees are fettered and bound like the buzu birds. At night, I lie in my shit like an ox or a sheep. My grave is open already and waiting. Already, all the funeral things have been prepared. He who gloats, gloats when he hears about it. She who gloats, gloats when she hears about it. The day is dark for all my family, for all my friends lamenting. The day is dark. There is a sort of happy ending, but I'm not going to read that part. This is a poem called Walenda. I'm working, it's a poem about a very dear friend of mine who died a number of years ago, a colleague of mine. I've been working on some poems about the poems that he wrote during the period of his sickness, and most of them I'm not, even after all these years, I'm not quite ready to read, but I do want to read one of them after this. This poem is called Walenda. The concluding lines are based on and quote are plagiarized from an article in Newsweek magazine about Walenda, the senior Walenda, of the family of great trapeze artists and tightrope walkers and so on. Walenda. I saw him in a coffee shop in Cambridge, radiant, argumentative, talking away, as joyful as anything, terrified, dying, Sisyphus in a panic, the words pushing the joy ahead of him like a stone uphill. Or else he was like a bicycle racer, racing, faster and faster, racing what he was saying. Because in what he was saying, no matter what, he couldn't get out ahead of the sniggering voice he kept on hearing whispering under his talking, telling him what was going to happen to him. Or else he was standing out on the edge of a cliff, trying his best to shout into the wind that was blowing hard in against him from the planets. Or else he was, quote, carrying a 23-foot balancing pole, and he moved out smoothly onto the 3/4 of an inch thick cable 120 feet high, beginning his 750-foot walk. The weather was bright, cold, and windy. He continued to move out smoothly until he reached the midpoint. Then suddenly the wind picked up to 30 miles per hour. He leaned into the wind to lean against it. The wire was dancing now under his feet. Sit down, one of his family called. He semi-crouched and called out down to the 9 men who were working the guy wires down below. Tighten it, daredevil. Then he tried to grab the cable, but could not hold it, and then put both hands back on the pole, and silently Daredevil Walenda fell plummeting down to death. And this is called on a poem by Arthur Gold. This is his poem. Do you remember slow-moving trolleys? Do you remember men dropping from the rear-end platforms of slow-moving trolleys? So our faith in God slowly drops, but not the monkey on our backs, not his nails digging into our necks. Guilt, justice, the desire to be good. Is there no end? Arthur and I come from the same part of the world. We went to the same high school at very different times. So I know what street in Orange, New Jersey, the trolley cars were on. God, this is my poem. God, lights flashing, bells ringing, God on his tracks, heading away somewhere to some destination. Who were the people who managed to get on board? Where is it they were being taken to? Arthur, yes, I remember the slow-moving trolleys. I remember the men clinging onto the trolleys, clinging like monkeys, not just to rear-end platforms, but hanging on by their nails just under the cables that hooked up above to the flashing, sparking lines. A lot of fireworks, God, on your way to some station, rattling and clanging, making a lot of noise. One thing you're famous for is making noise. Then suddenly, in the poem, God is the monkey that rides us like the habit we can't get free of. And for Arthur in his extremity, not being able to free himself from virtue was part of the pain. The obligations of being what he was, father and teacher, setting some kind of example. My sister Penny at my niece's house, the day her blood reported that the cancer had intensified 10 times since the last report. The obligation of being who she was, listening to the family pleasantries with something like what seemed to be like pleasure. And this is a poem. I'd like to read a little bit of the 12 tablets that comprise the Gilgamesh finding that in the 19th century that are now in the British Museum consists of 11 tablets, which are the Epic of Gilgamesh itself, and the 12th tablet, which is not at all the same poem, is a Babylonian close translation of a Sumerian poem, of a poem written in the previous civilization with a very different language, the code of which was only broken in the 20th century. And that's this weird, amazing poem. Gilgamesh and Enkidu, the wild man, are in it, but the wild man is a servant of Gilgamesh in this poem. The drum and drumsticks I had in the carpenter's house where the carpenter's daughter was and the carpenter's wife. Wife and daughter were like my mother and sister. The drum and drumstick that I had fallen down through a hole into the nether world, out of my sight, down through a hole in the floor. Who will bring back my drumstick from down there? Who will bring back my drum from the nether world? Enkidu heard what Gilgamesh was saying and said, his servant, Enkidu has already died, and said, his servant then to Gilgamesh, I will bring up the drumstick from below. I will bring back the drum from the nether world. Gilgamesh heard the promise of Enkidu, and with these words he thus admonished him, if you go down to the nether world for me, listen to what I tell you about your going. I'm sorry, he hadn't already died. He's going down. Do not put on clean clothes when you go down there, or they will know you come down there a stranger. Do not anoint your body with fragrant oil. The fragrance will cause them to gather about you like flies. Carry no staff or bow along with you, or startled up the spirits will flutter around you. Do not wear shoes when you go to the house of the dead. Let not your step be heard on that booming floor. Refrain from kissing the wife your heart has loved. Refrain from striking the wife your heart has hated. Refrain from kissing the son dear to your heart. Do not strike the son your heart has shunned, or you will be seized and held by the cry of the dead. Naked the goddess mother lies in hell. Naked Ninazu's mother lies exposed, the holy garment fallen from her shoulders. Bare are the breasts of the mother Eshkigal. Then Enkidu went down to the nether world, not heeding the admonitions of the king. He wore clean clothes when he went to the house of the dead, and so they knew he came down there a stranger. He anointed his body with fragrant oil, and they collected like flies, attracted by the fragrance. He carried a staff and bow with him when he went. Startled, the spirits fluttered all around him. The sounds of the shoes he wore were heard in that place. The echoing floor of the house of the dead resounded. He did not refrain from kissing the wife he loved. He did not refrain from striking the hated wife. He embraced and kissed the son who was dear to him, and did not refrain from striking the hated son. And so the cry of the dead seized him and held him. Naked the goddess mother lies in hell. Naked Ninazu's mother lies exposed, the holy garment fallen from her shoulders. Bare are the bones of the mother Erishkigal. The cry of the dead seized him and held him fast. Namtar the demon did not seize and hold him. Ashak the fever demon did not hold him. Nergal's pitiless viceroy did not seize him. It was the cry of the dead that seized and held him. He did not fall in battle. It was the cry. The nether world itself it was that seized him. Erishkigal the queen it was who held him. I'll move to the end of the poem. Enkidu comes up from there, and he's questioned him. The hole in the floor of the upper world was open. The spirit of Enkidu, a puff of breath, came forth from the nether world into the upper. Then Gilgamesh and Enkidu, companions, tried to embrace and kiss one another, companions. Sighing toward one another, they spoke these words, Now tell me how it is in the nether world. I will not tell you. If I told you how it is in the nether world, the arrangements of things, you would sit down and weep because I told you. Now tell me how it is, although I may sit down and weep because of what you tell me. So Enkidu told him the way it is down there. The vermin eat my body that once made Gilgamesh, the companion, rejoice to touch, as if it was old clothes, filthy, discarded. The vermin eat the body of Enkidu. Then Gilgamesh cried woe and fell to the ground because of the things that Enkidu was telling. After a time he further questioned him about the way it is among the dead. Have you seen down there the man who has no son? I have seen the sonless man in the nether world. How is it with the man who has one son? I have seen the man. He sits by the wall and weeps. Have you seen the man down there who has two sons? He sits on 2 bricks and has some bread to eat. How is it with the man who has 3 sons? He drinks from the water skin his sons have brought. Have you seen the man down there who has 4 sons? His heart rejoices as the heart rejoices of a farmer with 4 asses yoked to his cart. How is it with the man who has 5 sons? They treat him in the nether world as if he were a scribe of the court, dispenser of justice. Have you seen down there the man who has 6 sons? His heart rejoices as the heart rejoices of one who drives his plow in a rich field. How is it with the man with 7 sons? As if he were a companion of the gods, he sits upon a throne and listens to music. Have you seen the man who fell from the mast and drowned? I have seen the drowned man in the netherworld. How is it with the man who suddenly died? They bring pure water to him on his couch. Have you seen in the netherworld the famous warrior, he who fell on the battlefield in glory? The grieving parents raise up the head of the son. The mourning wife grieves at the couch of death. And he whose corpse was thrown away unburied, he wanders without rest through the world down there. The one who goes to the netherworld without leaving behind him any to mourn for him, garbage is what he eats in the netherworld. No dog would eat the food he has to eat. I'd like to read a passage from Book 6. I'm now in the process of translating the Aeneid. And these are lines from that passage. I think they're self-evident. Gilgamesh and Aeneas was going down to the underworld and was being led down there by the Sibyl, the Cumaean Sibyl. From here there was a road which led to where the waters of Tartary and Acheron were, where a bottomless whirlpool thick with muck heaving and seething, vomiting mire into the river Cocytus. Here was the dreadful boatman, keeper of these streams and waters, Chiron, frightful in his squalor, the gray hairs of his scraggled beard depending from his chin, his glaring eyes on fire, his filthy mantle hanging from his shoulders by a loose knot. He manages the sails, and with his pole conveys the dead across in his dark boat. He's old, but a god's old age is young in strength. A vast crowd, so many, rush to the riverbank. Women and men, famous, great-hearted heroes, the life in their hero bodies now defunct. Unmarried boys and girls, sons whom their fathers had to watch being placed on the funeral pyre, as many as the leaves of the forest that, when autumn's first chill comes, fall from the branches, as many as the birds that flock into the land from the great deep when, the season turning cold, has driven them over the seas to seek the sun. They stood beseeching on the riverbank, yearning to be the first to be carried across, stretching their hands out toward the farther shore. But the stern ferryman, taking only this one or that other one, pushes the others away. Aeneas cries out, excited by the tumult, "O Virgin, why are they crowding at the river? What is it that the spirits want? What is it that decides why some of them are pushed away and others sweep across the livid waters?" The aged priestess thus replied, "Anchises' son, true scion of the gods, these are the pools of the river Cocytus, and this the Stygian marsh." Wait a minute. Oh, shit. I think the rest of the passage is not here. I'm really sorry. I have to suspend the reading of that passage. I beg your pardon for that, but I didn't get the passage in. I'd like to read a poem of just 2 or 3 more poems. To read a short poem of my own from an earlier book, very short poem. 3 lines long, to Eden, in Eden. You lie in our bed as if an orchard were over us. You are what's fallen from those fatal boughs. Where will we go when they send us away from here? In that book, that poem is right next to the poem that Meg so kindly read at the beginning of the reading. And I'd like to read a poem by Sir Thomas Wyatt, the great early 16th century poet, to whom the poem that I'm going to read, a poem that I'm going to read is related, and to which the passage from Book 6 also was related. They flee from me that sometime did me seek. They flee from me that sometime did me seek. With naked foot, stalking in my chamber, I have seen them gentle, tame, and meek, that now are wild, and do not remember that sometime they put themselves in danger to take bread at my hand, and now they range, busily seeking with a continual change. Thanked be fortune, it has been otherwise 20 times better. But once in special, in thin array, after a pleasant guise, when her loose gown from her shoulders did fall, and she me caught in her arms long and small, therewithal sweetly did me kiss, and softly said, Dear heart, how like you this? It was no dream. I lay broad waking, but all is turned through my gentleness into a strange fashion of forsaking. And I have leave to go of her goodness, and she also to use newfangleness. But since that I so kindly am served, I would fain know what she hath deserved. Sorry. This poem is called That Now Are Wild and Do Not Remember. Where did you go to when you went away? It is as if you, step by step, were going someplace elsewhere, into some other range of speaking, that I had no gift for speaking, knowing nothing of the language of that place, to which you went with naked foot at night, into the wilderness there, elsewhere in the bed, elsewhere somewhere in the house, beyond my seeking. I have been so dislanguaged by what happened. I cannot speak the words that somewhere you maybe were speaking to others where you went. Maybe they talk together where they are, restlessly wandering along the shore, waiting for a way to cross the river. And I'd like to read a poem my book that's about a marvelous painting by Millet that's here in the MFA Museum. One of their greatest paintings. It's based on the story of Ruth in the Bible. Harvesters resting after Millet. In the middle of the day, in the great shadow of the grain stack, the harvesters are resting and having their midday meal. Boaz is approaching with a woman, meticulous as cattle in their attention to the task of resting and feeding. Some of them seem not to have noticed. Others regard her with the slow, blind, thorough look that cattle have, spellbound in the noontime heat. There's another ode of Horace. Called To Tyndarus. Sometimes Faunus comes from Arcady to fair Lucretius. While he's here, sees to it that my goats are sheltered from the summer heat and from the wind and rain. Tyndarus, when this place falls under the spell of the rocks and hills of Ustica echoing, the sound of Faunus playing upon his pipe, the wives of the rank male goat then, feeling easy, can wander through the woods in safety, searching for time and for arbutus where they hide. Nor do the kids have anything to fear from snakes, nor from Mars' favorite, the wolf. The gods protect me here because they know that I and my muse are ever devout and faithful. And here, for you, from the horn of plenty flow all the good things of our local fields and vines. Here you can shade yourself from the heat of summer, singing a song about Penelope and Circe of the glassy sea, and how both of them loved the wandering Ulysses. Here you will sit under these guardian plane trees, tasting the mild, innocent wine of Lesbos. Here Mars and Bacchus, Semele's child, will never contend to make trouble. And untroubled here, protected here in the garden, under these trees, you will have nothing to fear from jealous Cyrus, tearing your dress or disarranging your hair, pawing you with his cruel, offending hands. And then two short odes of Horace again, to Lide, the 28th ode of the third book. To Lide, what could be better to do on Neptune's day? Lide, go fetch the Caecuban wine and hurry. Let's strike a blow for folly. The sun is setting, and yet you tarry as if the hour stands still. Bring out that jar of vintage wine from the cellar, the one that dates from Bibulus' consulship. We'll sing some songs together on the shore. First I, the one about the god of the sea and the green-haired nymphs, the Nereids. Then you, in reply, will sing, accompanied by the lyre, the hymn to Latona and fleet Diana, and fleet Diana's arrows, and then the one about Venus, the queen of the shining Cyclades, the queen of Cnidos, and how she comes to visit Cyprian Paphos, drawn by her yoke of swans, and then a song appropriate to the dark. And finally, one of Horace's poems about poetry. Sorry. To his lyre. It's the 32nd ode of the first book. Pray for a new song. You and I together, under the trees in the shade, have played such songs as could live beyond the years, the end of the year, and longer. O lyre, O tortoise shell, first stringed and tuned to make the beautiful music Alcaeus played in the Grecian battle camp, and having survived the storm and brought his boat safe to the wave-drenched beach, played on the beach his songs of Bacchus and of Venus and the child who clings to her, and dark-haired, dark-eyed Lycus whom he loved. Let us play a Roman song. O instrument of Phoebus Apollo's favor, O gladly heard at Jupiter's table itself, O medicine of sorrows, now bring forth the music I invoke. Thank you.